Hi, welcome to Watercolorish. I'm Paul Pitzker. Today I'm going to demo a very small, simple painting of a monarch butterfly, which should be an easy project for a watercolor beginner to see through from beginning to end. We're going to use a very simple palette consisting of Winsor Blue green shade, Quinacridone Magenta, and Winsor Yellow. Those three paints will be our primary colors. To those I'm going to add Payne's Gray and Lunar Black. These are all Winsor & Newton color names, except for Lunar Black, which is made by Daniel Smith. So I normally prefer to paint on stretched Arches 140-pound hot-pressed paper, but to keep things simple here, I'm going to paint this one on 300-pound hot-pressed paper, which should be fine unstretched because this piece is so small and we're not going to get it very wet. I cut out an 8 by 8 inch piece with scissors and tape it to a clean piece of plywood using drafting tape. Then I mark off a 4 by 4 inch square in the middle and put drafting tape around the edges of that so the finished painting will have a clean border. Because insects aren't good at holding still for hours, I'm going to paint from a source photo, which I took myself and which I brightened in Photoshop. I also changed the background and foreground, drawing the legs and antennae and shadow more to my liking, all digitally, before I even started to paint. You don't have to go to such trouble, but for a small painting with a lot of detail, I will say it's super helpful to print your source image the same size you're going to paint it, and then put it right next to your work while you're doing the pencil sketch, and later while you're painting. You're welcome to use my photo as a source image for your own painting with no copyright restrictions, by the way. I'll put a link to it in the video description. So to start out, I just lightly draw the most minimal outlines of shapes with a soft pencil that won't scratch the paper surface. But it seems that no matter how lightly I draw, it's still too dark and I have to tap it all over with the gum eraser to make it even lighter so the graphite doesn't wash off and muddy the paint. I put my printed source image as close as possible to where I'm going to start painting, and I tape it down there with a little drafting tape. I can move it later, but for now the proximity is a big help. So I start by mixing Winsor Yellow and Quinacridone Magenta to make a very fine-grained, semi-staining orange color, which I'll use to paint all the orange and red areas of the butterfly wings. The reason we want to paint the lighter areas first is because we don't want any darker paint to bleed into a lighter area later. It's much safer if the light areas are done and dry when we do the dark parts. That's the rationale behind a basic watercolor maxim, which is you paint from light to dark. It's fine if the orange areas aren't perfectly uniform. In fact, some gradations will make them more interesting. If you think you've gotten too dark, you can blot with a paper towel while the paint is still wet to lighten it. But a more common mistake at this point is to not get it dark enough. That's why it's helpful to have your source photo close by so you can match the value of that orange. Keep in mind, these spots are going to look much lighter later when they have black paint surrounding them. That blue brush I'm using, by the way, is a Cotman size 0 watercolor round, where Cotman is the budget student brush line from Winsor & Newton. I've found that in the small 0 to 1 sizes, they point about as well and last about as long as more expensive Kolinsky sable brushes, and you can buy 4 or 5 of these for the price of one pure sable brush. So think of each of these orange shapes as a separate wet in wet area. Some of them have darker shadows cast by structures on the other wing, and I'm going to paint those in with a little Payne's Gray mixed into my orange paint mix. This got too dark here, so I blotted it, and now it's too light, so I'm doing that again. And it's too dark, and then too light again. Let's see if the third time's the charm. Kind of. I might come back to that one. The same thing happens on the next one. Too dark, but then the blotting lifts it all off and it's like starting over. So I just keep repeating this until it looks mostly right. I want these little shadows to look soft and fuzzy with no sharp edges, and the blotting actually helps with that. If you look closely at a butterfly's white spots in a photo like this, you can see that most of them are not really white. The lower ones in shadow are more gray-blue, and the ones up higher are a little bit yellow. So I'm going to paint the lower ones more gray-green because I'm concerned that blue will look like there's a hole and the sky is showing through the butterfly. I outline the legs with Payne's gray mixed with Quinacridone Magenta, which makes a dull violet. And I fill in the eye with green made from Winsor Blue green shade mixed with Winsor Yellow with just a touch of Payne's gray added. For the butterfly's shadow, I pre-mix some Payne's gray and Winsor Yellow, which makes a dull green, and then mix some of that with Quinacridone Magenta for a cooler gray. I'm also going to mix Winsor Blue green shade with the green I mixed for the eye to make a cool blue-green. Shadows are much more interesting, I think, when they have multiple colors. I put a piece of 1/2 inch drafting tape along the top edge of what will be the table surface, and I curve it a little downwards because straight lines are boring, I think. I use my fingernail to push down the tape where it overlaps so there's no air gap that might let paint seep in under the tape. To start, I get the whole table surface area lightly wet, except the part where the shadow is going to be, where I want to have more control, and so not so much wet and wet bleeding right now. I outline the shadow area with my blue-green mix, and then I paint some orange shapes to suggest light is shining through the orange areas of the butterfly wings like sun through a stained glass window. Then I fill in some of the gray shadow mix, but the trick is going to be to keep those different color areas from bleeding together into a big muddy mess, which is why I didn't want to start with this area completely wet. The edge of this shadow is turning out much darker than the interior, but I'm hoping I can fix that later. I can move the paint around a little at this point, but when I'm doing wet and wet like this, the meter is running and I can't continue blending and tweaking it forever. So I use a blow dryer to commit it to the current state and get it evenly dry. But notice I still make some minor adjustments even while I'm drying it, just because I'm obsessive that way. I confess I'm not thrilled about the dark border right there at the edge, but I'm hoping I can soften that later. And the opportunity to do this arises as I'm vignetting the foreground, that is, darkening it around the edges. I got the edges of the shadow wet again while doing this, which allowed me to lighten it a little. So I forgot to press record before starting on the background, but the first steps just involved masking the butterfly with drafting tape and getting the whole sky area wet, and then painting Winsor Blue green shade around the edges. This vignetting I'm doing now is too severe. That is, the transition from dark to light in the sky is too extreme for my liking. But I decided to dry it anyway to see if I could get used to it. And the answer was no. It didn't grow on me at all. So I impulsively decided to paint over the sky again with a much more saturated wash. I retaped the top edge of the table there, but decided to wing it, pardon the pun, by not retaping the butterfly at all this time. Since the edge of the butterfly will be mostly black, it's not that risky. I fill in under the butterfly with the same diluted Winsor Blue to match the lower sky, and that's it for the background. For the butterfly body, I mix Payne's gray with Lunar Black to get a very dark color, and very carefully paint this around the butterfly's eye and around all the little spots I painted earlier. You can leave these spots larger than they need to be at first, and then go back and make them smaller if you want to do this cautiously, which is not a bad idea if you're a beginner. It's much harder to make these light spots larger later. I'm using a Winsor Newton Series 7 Kolinsky Sable brush size 00 for this, and it's old and has lost a lot of hair, so it's actually more like a 000 size brush, if there's such a thing. Along the edges of the butterfly body, I paint tiny dark hairs sticking out into the sky area. And this is really how slow I go in real time. It's a time-consuming process. So just put on some good music or an audiobook and get into the chill zone. Okay, that's enough chilling for now. In order to make this video semi-watchable, I'm going to time-lapse this a little. You can see I'm leaving the spots a little larger than they should be for now and moving out into the wings. I use a smooth metal ruler to paint the wing edges, not as a guide for my brush, but as a guide for my hand holding the brush. In case you don't know this simple trick, here it is. I put my pinky and ring fingers together and press the ruler's edge into the notch between them so I can slide my whole hand along the ruler in a straight line or in a gentle curve, like here, along the edge of this wing. So I continue on, filling in the black very methodically all the way around our monarch subject. This is where we leave the awkward middle phase of this project, and it starts to look like something. It's the contrast between the lighter spots and the very dark paint that makes this subject really pop. I use the same dark mix of Payne's Gray and Lunar Black to paint the antennae, leaving highlights at the tips. And I also use it to darken the legs, leaving a little of the violet underpainting showing to serve as highlights there. And now that this is all looking more realistic, it's becoming more obvious that the shadow is not nearly dark enough, because a real butterfly in bright sun would cast a pretty dark shadow. So I go over the shadow again with Payne's Gray mixed with a little Quinacridone Magenta in the lower areas, and with Payne's Gray mixed with Winsor Blue and Winsor Yellow to make a cool gray-green in the top areas near the back of the wing. I also introduce a little clean water at the top to lighten the color there. You don't want to do this when your paint has been drying for a few minutes or more, because then the water will cause a paint bloom or cauliflower pattern as it spreads. Now I'm going to dry this with my hair dryer on a low air high heat setting as usual, keeping the hair dryer moving to get even drying everywhere. I use a soft sable brush and clean water to try to soften that dark line that formed at the back edge of the wing shadow. Since these are staining pigments, not much paint comes off when I do this, but it does look a bit softer after a while. I blot with a paper towel and continue trying to soften that dark edge. It's working, but it's also lightening the interior of the shadow a little. So while this area is still wet, I'm going to go in and darken the area just inside the shadow with the same paint I used to paint it, just to get it more even. And when it's just about how I want it, then I hit it with a hairdryer again to prevent other drying lines from forming. I want to make the front edge of the shadow show the shape of the butterfly as it might be seen from below on the surface where the paper lies, so I need more articulation between the head and thorax. To get this, I cut a thin piece of drafting tape to mask the wing shadow, and then I cut 2 curved pieces to mask the head and thorax. Then I use a short nylon bristle brush dipped in clean water to scrub off some of the shadow paint to get those shapes. This is where it's helpful to use the best quality paper, which can hold up to this treatment without unraveling. For the text, I mix Payne's Gray with a little Quinacridone Magenta and Winsor Yellow to make a mostly, slightly warm gray like you'd see in graphite from a pencil. I make the lines darker where there are sharper curves, and also anywhere the pencil stopped and reversed direction to make it look natural, like the pencil was bearing down harder in those spots. And the last thing I do is extend the end of the wing shadow a little, because the light logic is not quite right. This produces a dark line again where the new paint overlaps the old paint a little. I can lighten that some by getting it wet again and blotting, but it's hard to make it disappear entirely, and I finally decide I can live with it. So, the final and most satisfying step is removing the drafting tape around the edges. And while I'm struggling with that, I'll just say if you're wondering why I haven't posted many YouTube videos lately, it's because I've been busy sharing watercolor tips and tricks on TikTok, where my account is also called Watercolorish, in case you want to find me over there. Some of those videos I can also share here as YouTube shorts, but only if they're less than a minute long, because them's the rules. So, phew, I've finally gotten the edge masking off, and doesn't the painting look so much better now? Peeling off the tape really does seem like a magic trick every time. Anyway, thanks for watching, and I hope you'll let me know in the comments if you have any questions. Thanks.